me, it's a thrill to be here at this lectern. And I say lectern because General Jan Yulee out in San Diego one time screamed, he said, "This is not a podium, this is a lectern." So I always remembered that. So it's great to be here at this lectern. And thank you for the honor of the invitation to speak to you today briefly. It's a thrill for any Marine to receive such an invite on this special day, November 10th, the 241st birthday of our beloved Corps. And it's always great to be around Marines, as you heard General Neller say. Love to be around Marines, that's why we're here. And it's especially great to be around Marines because we know that our service includes the bravest, boldest, best looking, and most humble members of any service branch. I'll share that I spent several summers, as Paul mentioned, at MCRD San Diego, running the MECEP prep school for enlisted Marines seeking to become officers. And I was billeted at a nearby Navy base, some of you may be familiar with it, and which meant that every day I had to go in and out of the base, which was manned by Navy MPs. And we had to show ID whenever we returned to base. So there was one Navy MP in particular who enjoyed scrutinizing my ID card. And I'd see him every single day, and every day he'd ask for my ID, and he'd look at it for like longer than he needed to. Then he'd look at me, look at the ID, then he'd salute and wave me on. And it was a little bit annoying, and I think he knew it was just a little bit annoying, but he did it because he could. Now, we all love the Navy, but again, there are a few squids out there who delight in hassling jarheads, especially jarhead officers like me. So anyway, one evening I returned to base. It was dark, and I was not in the best of moods for whatever reason. And a different MP was at the gate. He was a younger guy. Wasn't the same MP. So I handed him my ID, and this other MP stands looking at it for an inordinate amount of time, and I sat stewing in my car, and I finally went off on the sentry. I'm not proud of it, but I did. And I'm going to paraphrase my language here. Gosh darn it, sailor, I've been freaking staying here for over a month, and I just don't need to be hassled for no good reason. So why don't you just return my ID, render me a proper salute, and allow me to return to my quarters, thank you. So the guard was shaken by my outburst, but he still stared at my ID for another moment. Then he returned it to me, rendered a salute, and waved me on. But as I returned the ID to my wallet, I realized it was not my ID, it was my MasterCard. So didn't I feel dumb? So we all need a dose of humility from time to time, even though we are the bravest, boldest, and best looking. Anyway, thanks again for the honor of this invitation to speak. The invite apparently came about because Benji saw some photos that Beth helped me to post from Washington, D.C. in August. And what had happened was I received a surprise invitation by email from the Commandant's office to attend the retirement ceremony of General J. Paxton, the 4-star General Assistant Commandant, who was my first company commander back in '83. And at the reception afterwards, we were just looking at some photos. I was telling General Petraeus was there. He said, "Beth, I need this picture of me and General Conway, me and General Dunford, me and General Neller, me and General Paxton." I mean, so yes, I was excited. You all get that. Pam, you had a picture of you and General Conway, my heroes. Oh my gosh, my heroes. So of course I put them on Facebook. Benji saw it, called me up, invited me to speak, and I'm thrilled to be here. But the point is that General Paxton made it a point to invite me. I hadn't seen him in a long time. Says something about loyalty. Says something about remembering your comrades, the people you used to work with, or for, or under. In fact, I just got a message from General Paxton yesterday congratulating me on my election to the New Hampshire House of Representatives. So, again, staying in touch. Some of you know Al Baldessero. Is Al still here? Yeah, hopefully, Al, I'll see you at the State House. I know it's a big place, but we'll probably cross paths, hopefully.
We'll get you on the Veterans Committee.
Okay, well, I'll go where they send me, you know, so. Anyway, when General Paxton was just a captain, he was my first company commander with 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. You saw that battalion with some people on the video. And I remember us running around Tokyo as company grade officers on leave back in '84. I'll kind of leave it at that, except I'll say, never dreaming that, I was just a dumb second lieutenant, that someday I would actually be a lieutenant colonel and see some of the things and do some of the things that I did. And I certainly didn't, I knew Cap Paxton was an impressive guy, but I never expected that he would have a 42-year career that would lead to 4 stars. So anyway, some of you have been, I know, to Marine Barracks 8th and I, and all of you have heard the Marine Corps band, the President's Own, best band in the world. And they put on a great show. And it's a thrill for me to share it with Beth. And in fact, as we walked to 8th and I, we caught up to this Lieutenant General George Flynn, retired Lieutenant General. Now he was the OSO, Officer Selection Officer, here in Manchester in 1981, when he signed me up for the Marine Corps. Small world. In fact, I saw him as we walked into 8th and I said, General Flynn, I don't know if you remember me, Mike Moffett, you signed me up for the Marine Corps back in 1981. And he looked at me and he said, I'm so sorry. But, I think he says that to all the people that he signed up. So anyway, when Lieutenant General Flynn or Captain Flynn signed me up, I was teaching history at Trinity High School, where Paul Pouliot went. And my department chair was a guy named Tom Spaulding. Some of you, I know Paul remembers Tom, retired lieutenant colonel, fought in World War II, fought in Korea. He was in Southeast Asia. I used to sit in on his classes, and he'd sometimes share recollections. Some people, I sense this today, some people are more averse to talking about some people never talk about what they did or saw, and some people are comfortable talking about it. And Tom Spaulding didn't mind talking about what he'd seen and done, tying it into history. And I loved to sit on his classes. I felt very inferior to Mr. Spaulding. I was 26 years old. I'd never flown in a plane. I had no war stories or recollections of traveling abroad. My only war stories were fraternity stories, which I really couldn't tell in class. Benji's laughing, but he was in my fraternity also. Anyway, so my brother John had enlisted in the Marines. He was honor man at Paris Island, embassy guard in Beirut, and he was transferred to the embassy in Ottawa, which is the only embassy you can drive to. So some of my fraternity brothers and I went up to see Sergeant Moffett in Ottawa to see a concert. It was an Eagles concert. A lot of you look a little bit older, so you know Eagles was a band way back in well, this was the 70s. So anyway, I drove up with some friends, fraternity brothers. We went to the Eagles concert, but afterwards we went to the Marine House in Ottawa, which was even better. And I was so impressed. The Marines, bravest, boldest, best looking, they had such camaraderie and panache and elan. And I'm watching these guys, and they just were tight, and they were confident, and they were fit. They were surrounded by pretty Canadian girls, and I said to my brother, I want to be an embassy guard. And he said, well, you've been to college. He said, forget it, go talk to an OSO. And I did, and that's how I went to eventually talk to Captain Flynn and get signed up. So I signed up, went to 3-5, deployed to the Far East. I mentioned Captain Paxton, my first company commander. And I loved the infantry, but I decided not to try to augment and stay in. I would have had to have gotten into a different MOS. And I loved the infantry, and the idea, and I apologize, I know not everybody here was infantry, but back then, I was talking to Al, Motor T now is cool, because in Iraq, Afghanistan, I mean, to drive and keep that stuff. But back then, Motor T, supply, logistics, admin, oh my gosh. I didn't stay in, and then I missed it, So a few years later, I was working at Plymouth State College at the time, and I heard of a reserve command billet opening up in Maine that I qualified for. I was working at Plymouth, and so I went to my boss at Plymouth State and asked about if I could look into this reserve opportunity. I was sports information director at the time, and there were football games on weekends, and we had to work through that and get coverage. But finally, he said, go ahead and go for it. We'll try to support that. But then with one caveat, he said, no, you're not gonna go off to any wars, are you? And I said, this is January of 1990, and I'm a history guy. I said, even during Vietnam, very few reservists, hardly any, were activated. And this is 1990, the Berlin Wall was coming down, peace was breaking out all over. So of course, as my brother told me when I went in the Marines, if you join the Marines, you never know what might happen. So as you all know, before 1990 ended, me and my men were dug in, Kuwaiti border, getting ready to go to war. And I was happy to be there. I mean, somebody said earlier, said, you gotta be crazy. I wanted to be there, thrilled to be there. Marines ride to the sounds of the guns, and that was where I wanted to be. Foolish as though that may have been. But you all know the history. Some of you have talked, Jeff, some of you have been there. The ground war got over pretty quick, and I'm going to get back to Kuwait and Desert Storm. Yeah, we went through the minefields, burning oil fields. I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. But I want to fast forward to 9/11, September 11, 2001. We all remember that day where we were. And as Paul mentioned, I was activated before the end of October. I was back in uniform, Central Command, MacDill Air Force Base, Tampa, working for General Franks. What an experience in the top secret war room. Was it stressful in there? Yes. It was a general who, especially I was in the ground desk, and we would have to brief, 12 hours on, 12 hours off, 12 hours on. We'd have to brief everybody at the end of every shift. And this general, we called him Satan. And this is easy after that. I'd get up for a brief, and we'd put slides up, and he would take them apart and just rip us to shreds. Oftentimes, I remember I'd sit down, and then the next guy would come up and give the weather forecast, and I remember somebody said to me, he said, "I thank God every night that I'm not you." So, even though that was not a combat situation, I'll never forget working for General Franks in the top secret war room in Central Command. As my brother said, you join the Marines, you never know what's going to happen. So anyway, real quick, as Paul mentioned, 2003, I have a background in academia, and I got the best job in the world, teaching and running the prep school for future officers in San Diego. And best job, great students, great staff, great weather. It meshed perfectly with my civilian job. And one of my MESEP colleagues there was a reserve artillery officer, a professor at Clemson University, professor of history, and he told me about this history division, Marine Corps University thing. So I was able to get a billet there, and as Paul mentioned, in 2010, at the age of 54, I was off to Afghanistan. I was actually a year older than General Nicholson. I might have been the oldest Marine in Afghanistan, but it was wonderful. I was able to pick my spots as a lieutenant colonel and look at the map and get an intel briefing and see what was going on here or there. And I would fly to combat outposts and go in there, and I had a pistol. Before I get on the helicopter, I saw this gunny, and of course I'm so used to counting every bullet. I said, "Can I get some ammunition before I go up to Dalaram?" And he just gave me a bag of bullets, and I said, this is for a 9mm Beretta. He said, where do I sign, who do I return them to? And he looked at me and said, "Just shoot them off." So, you gotta love, and I'm a Republican now. Lack of regulations. Let's cut back on regulations. Bag of bullets, shoot them off. Anyway, so as I was mentioned, I met an interpreter. And where's Sergeant Coughlin? Is he still? Yeah, I just saw Master Sergeant Coughlin came up to me. I met him in Delaram, small world, and we both know this interpreter named Fahim Fazli, a native Afghan who was a refugee, came to America, waited in line, learned the language, learned English, became a citizen, became a Hollywood actor. You've all seen him in movies. He's been in American Sniper and Argo and Iron Man. He worked with Tom Hanks in Charlie Wilson's War. But he went back to Afghanistan as a Terp, as an interpreter. And I met him in Dalaram where Sergeant Coughlin, Master Sergeant Coughlin was working. And we were just talking about this. He speaks 7 languages. His English not so good. And So we stayed in touch. We said, let's see if we can make this book happen. And we did. Some of you know Dale Dye, movie actor, Warriors Inc. And I met him when I was still a historian at a thing out west. And his company ended up publishing our book. We spent a year working on it. I had some tough editors. And wonderful, well, very nice reviews, won the gold medal for top biography from the Military Writers Society of America. So anyway, out of this trip to Afghanistan, I met this Hollywood actor. Now, back to loyalty and camaraderie, Fahim Fazli, the actor, flew into New Hampshire last weekend. I mentioned I was a state rep candidate, and he came all the way from California and held a sign at the Loudon Town dump for me during the sign wave Saturday morning, passed out brochures, held a sign, and he said, I'm not Republican, I'm not Democrat. You know, if my agent knew I was doing politics, you know, especially for a Republican, I'd be dead in Hollywood. So he said, I'm not Republican, I'm not a Democrat, but I want to support my friend Mike. So anyway, I just took him to the airport yesterday, and again, that's as my brother said, once you join the Marines, anything can happen. So my last active duty Marine Corps ball was 2010. I came back from Afghanistan in Fredericksburg, Marine Corps University, 1,400 people there, gigantic ball. And I was excited to go. I was about to retire. So anyway, just before the ball, this major came into my office and said I needed to report to LtCol for a ceremony rehearsal. And I looked at him, I said, no, I don't need to go to any ceremony rehearsal. I'm going to go to the ball, but I'm just going to, drink at the ball. And then the major said to me, he said, sir, we've discovered that you'll be the oldest active Marine at the ball. And the general wants you to, in the ceremony, to get the first piece of cake. That just happened here. I was angry, I was horrified, and I was upset. And I said, come on, there's 1,400 people there. Somebody's going to be older than me. General Neller's got to be older than me. And I said, General Neller is a year older than you, but he's cutting the cake, so you got to be in the ceremony. So anyway, turns out, and I saw General Neller in August. I was showing pictures. Not that I know him that well, the commandant, but when I saw him at General Paxton's retirement thing, I reminded him about that ceremony, and I said, sir, they told us that you wanted it done right. Do you know that we had to rehearse for 3 hours? And he said, well, sorry about that. But, so anyway, before closing, I do want to harken back to Operation Desert Storm. Around March 1st of 1991, I was with 125, as has been mentioned. Jeff was there with Bravo Company, attached to the 1st Marine Division, and we crossed, as I said, those minefields into the burning oil well fires, and we dealt with hundreds of Iraqi prisoners before the ceasefire ended the fighting. A real quick anecdote about these prisoners that we were processing. We're a reserve unit from New England, and so we're searching some of these Iraqi prisoners, and this one guy, and I'm watching my men are, just routinely, guarding and searching these Iraqi prisoners as they come through. This one Iraqi spoke English. He took off his green uniform top, and he says, hey, he had a LA Lakers T-shirt on underneath his uniform. And he spoke English. He said, hey, I was in California going to school. I came home on school break and they threw me in the Army. He said, I hate Saddam. I don't want to be in the Army. I'm glad you guys are here. I love Bush. He says, look, I'm even a Lakers fan. Now, our battalion is all from New England. So I had this Corporal Townsend, who raised his M16 ever so slightly, and he said, Lakers fan? Well, we're Marines, and we're Celtics fans, and you're in big trouble. Of course, in the Iraqi army, they shoot somebody for anything. So this guy says, I like the Lakers, but Larry Bird's my favorite player. So we're gonna laugh over that. But anyway, to finish this up, a couple of days after that, we convoyed through Kuwait City. The ceasefire, the war ended, and we're convoying through Kuwait City. And we passed numerous destroyed vehicles and shell holes, the occasional dead body. Kuwait City had no electricity, but we rolled into it, and the people came out and they cheered us, and it was, I'll never forget it. And Jeff, you might have been part of that, or some of the rest of you. It was wonderful to be the objects of such love and adulation and affection as these people. We'd given them their country back, their sovereignty back. You know, instead of the rest of their lives with Saddam's secret police watching them, and we freed them. And the love that came to us from them, and I always felt guilty about that. You know, we were there for like a week, and suddenly we get a big, you know, it's over. And you know, people who slogged it out in World War II or Vietnam or Korea, it was disproportionate, but I'll never forget the love and affection that flowed to us. And I thought back to Mr. Spaulding's class. He used to show videos like of the liberation of they were films, not videos in those days, of the liberation of Paris. And I'm a history guy. I always would watch those things and think, how great is it to be a GI and have all these Parisians and French people giving you wine and hugs and kisses and love because you gave them their freedom back. And I never dreamed, like my brother said, join the Marines, you never know what's going to happen. Never dreamed that I would be in that situation where, as we roll through Kuwait City, all these Kuwaitis coming out, cheering for us. So, I think back to World War II, and it wasn't just Paris. There were countless villages and towns and hamlets where the Americans came in and gave these people their freedom back. And how beautiful to be a liberator. Never thought I would ever be in that situation, being showered with love, affection, appreciation. So anyway, I was in the back of a truck, a 6x, with some of my men rolling through Kuwait City, feeling the love, and I thought of those World War II guys and the liberation of those European towns. And I had a Marine, a guy named Lance Corporal Hilton. Lance Corporal Hilton was a complainer. He was always bitching, if I can say that word. And you know, maybe some of you were complainers. You know, some of the best Marines were the biggest complainers. And he was a good Marine, but he just was always complaining. And I remember him saying, he'd say, you know, damn it, when I joined the Marines, I didn't know they were going to send me to some Middle Eastern hellhole to maybe get killed. You know, and this wasn't what I expected when I joined up. You know, I needed the education benefits. You know, it's not, shut up. You know, so, but he did his job. He's a good man, but always complained. So anyway, here we are in this, rolling through Kuwait City in the back of a truck. And so he's up in front of the truck, and he's a little bit of a ham, and he's enjoying all this adulation. So he takes his helmet off and somehow comes up with a Arab headdress, like keffiyeh or whatever they call it. So he puts that on, and he finds a couple of flags. Then he stands up in the front of the truck with his flags and his Arab keffiyeh, and he's a rock star. Everybody's going crazy, like the crowd's seeing him, and he's just absorbing the energy, and he's just loving this rock star moment. And then, I'll never forget, I'm in the back of the truck, and he's up front, rock star, and he yells back to me, he said, "Sir, this is great, I'm going to re-enlist." The notion of Lance Corporal Hilton, the biggest complainer I ever heard, suddenly re-enlisting, oh my gosh. So for me, that was the defining moment of Operation Desert Storm, along with one other moment that occurred right after that. After watching Lance Corporal Hilton, I glanced to the truck in front of our truck, and there was an old master gunnery sergeant. We had about a dozen Vietnam veterans in our battalion back in '91, and this guy was he worked in communications, old master gunnery sergeant. And I earlier heard somebody was at Khe Sanh, or a couple of y'all were at Khe Sanh. This guy was at Khe Sanh, Vietnam. Most of you know about Khe Sanh, and he was like 120 pounds when the siege ended, and he survived that, came back, stayed like us, stayed in touch with the Marines, stayed in the reserves, went to Kuwait. So he wasn't like Hilton, you know, waving it, but he was just sitting there taking it all in. But I got kind of choked up looking at the old master gunnery sergeant, and I thought, how great is that for him to get such a hero's welcome with all of us, a welcome that he probably did not get like that when he returned from Vietnam. So that imagery of the old Master Gunnery Sergeant taking in the chairs in Kuwait will always stay with me. As my brother said, once you become a Marine, anything can happen, as you know. So anyway, thank you again for this wonderful invitation to speak to you today. It's a thrill and an honor for me to have a chance to share a few words with you all. Have a happy 241st birthday, and as the chosen few like to say, semper fi and stay warm.